When I say demon possession, what's the first thing you think of? The Exorcist? Maybe Rosemary's Baby? Or do you feel confusion or perhaps even disdain for a primitive superstition? Well, on today's show, we're going to talk about a real-life attempt to cast a demon out of a man, and, let's just say it doesn't go quite like not only the people trying to exorcise the demon thought it would, but the way most of us probably think it will either. Hello and welcome to Tales from the Scrypt. I'm Louis Marsh, Senior Pastor of River Church here in Parker, Arizona, and your host for this show. Welcome to episode number 7 already. As unbelievable as demon possession might seem to you, this is a story you can believe in. Just remember that even today, most of the people who live on planet Earth are firm believers in evil spirits and spiritual possession. So it is possible that maybe, just maybe, they might know something that we don't. Think about it as you listen to this story. Our story takes place when the Apostle Paul was teaching in Ephesus. One day, a group of 7 traveling Jewish exorcists entered the town. This was a fairly common Jewish practice, as Jewish exorcists usually traveled all over the Roman world, especially where they knew there were Jewish colonies. It was probably unusual to have 7 brothers doing this together, and it's entirely possible that they inherited their way of doing this from their father, Sceva, who was a Jewish high priest. Now, it just so happens that we know a little bit about how Jewish exorcisms were practiced in the first century, thanks mostly to good old Jewish historian Josephus, who worked for the Romans and wrote a long history of his time. He describes this in a Jewish exorcism that he had seen himself. This was written in Book 7 of Antiquities of the Jews. Quote, "He put the ring on, one of those sorts mentioned by Solomon, to the nostrils of the demoniac, after which he drew out the demon through his nostrils. And when the man fell down immediately, he adjured him to return to him no more, making still mention of Solomon, and reciting the incantations which he composed. And when Eleazar would persuade and demonstrate to the spectators that he had such a power, he set a little way off a cup, or a basin, full of water, and commanded the demon as he went out of the man to overturn it, and thereby let the spectators know that he had left the man. And this was done." Unquote. That's a brief description, but you can see that it was quite the show. Strange sense, ye ancient chants, woo, attributed to Solomon, even though there's no evidence that he had anything to do with them, but never mind that. Dramatically drawing the evil spirit out with a special ring. And best of all is the trick of having the cup of water tip over as a sign that, like Elvis, the demon had left the building. Now, there's a lot of work to do all that, and it carried the expense of collecting the scents and the candles, etc. Plus, they had to memorize all those hoary old chants, and, well, that just makes for a bit of work, doesn't it? But then they ran into Paul, and other Christians, no doubt, who were casting out evil spirits, and all they did was command the spirit to come out in the name of Jesus. Imagine how amazed these professional exorcists felt when they saw these amateurs having all sorts of success just calling on the name of Jesus. How galling. Well, they were no one's fools. If this really worked, they could cast out spirits in record time, thus allowing them to double, or maybe even triple, their profits. They didn't need to have a house dropped on them. No way. They decided to horn in on the action and picked up the very next possessed person. Okay, let's try this on. How galling. Well, they were nobody's fools. If this really worked, they could cast out spirits in record time, thus allowing them to double or even triple their workload, not to mention their profits. They didn't need to have a house dropped on them. No way. They decided to horn in on the action and picked the very next possessed person that they were told about to try this new approach on. They all went to the poor, suffering man's house and decided to jump in. So one of them said, quote, "I adjure you by the Jesus whom Paul proclaims," unquote. Well, so far so good, but what happened next wasn't in the script they usually followed. In fact, I'm sure it had never happened to them before at all, because if it had, they would have found another line of work for sure. The evil spirit in the man answered them, speaking through the man. He said, quote, "Jesus I know, and Paul I recognize." This was all said in a voice very different from his own. "But who are you?" Unquote. In the Gospels, demons always recognized Jesus for who he was, and this one was no different. The fact that he recognized who Paul was meant that he saw Paul as a real soldier for the Lord and a real enemy. I really wish I could have seen the expressions on their faces after the demon spoke. It would have been so awesome. Or if you had your phone with you, you could have videoed it and it would be the most viral video ever. Because while the seven brothers looked at each other with wide eyes, while desperately trying to come up with a reply, the man jumped them. This would have been a great time to say, oy vey. He leapt on them, and in the words of the book of Acts, mastered them. The word means to become Lord or master. In other words, he beat them up, and then he beat them down. He took them to school and gave them an education they would never forget. The odds were 7-1, but in reality, the odds were all in favor of the one. He was jumping around like Jackie Chan or Bruce Lee on crack and wouldn't let them go. Was it demonic kung fu versus Jewish jiu-jitsu? Well, I don't know, but I do know he wouldn't let them go until he had first ripped off their clothes. Now imagine what a sight this would have made. One by one, they emerged from the house with black eyes, bloody noses, swollen lips. They staggered away from the house just as fast as they could, but worst of all, in their minds, was the fact that they weren't just naked, but they were naked in public. I can see them staggering down the street, their hands covering their circumcision, desperately looking for a blanket or some Band-Aids. Judaism has a long history of what is called the principle of modesty. Here's what Rabbi Maurice Lamb says about that. Quote, "The principle of modesty rejects all nudity, not only in public, but also before family members at home. Thus, one must not pray or recite the Shema prayer while one is naked or standing in the presence of a naked person." Unquote. Can you imagine how these guys felt at not just being naked, but being naked in public, in front of men, women, and children? It would have been beyond humiliation. The Bible doesn't say what happened to them after that, but I'm guessing they found a whole new line of work, and they found it right away like the next day. When you play with fire, you'll probably be burned, and when you mess with supernatural powers, it is not unusual to get burned either. And someday I'm going to tell you a story from the Old Testament that shows this as well. But for today, let the lesson stand. Do not mess with things beyond your comprehension if you don't want to end up in a whole bunch of trouble. And that's going to do it for this episode of Tales from the Scrypt. Thank you so much for watching. My name's Louis Marsh. I'd love to hear from you in the comments section. Just leave your comments. Give us a thumbs up if you enjoyed this, and please, if you can, subscribe. That would be such a big help to this brand new ministry. And now, stay tuned for footnotes. Hello, and welcome to Footnotes. Just two things today on Footnotes. First of all, as you might have noticed from the title, yes, the title for this episode, The Incompetent Seven, is my ripoff of The Magnificent Seven, which, of course, is an amazing movie. If you've never seen the original, now they've done some remakes of it, and they're terrible. So for you young people out there that have never seen the original with Yul Brynner and Steve McQueen, you may not even know who those people are. You've probably heard of Steve McQueen. I don't know about Brynner and all the other guys that played in that movie. There's a great Western to watch for you. So yes, I stole the title, I admit it, and I bow before the original creators. Secondly, when you think about these Jewish exorcists, of course, it's easy to see them sort of as a cartoon figure, especially given what happened to them when the demons beat them up and sent them running out of the house naked. The ultimate embarrassment. But I think there's a way that they probably rationalize their behavior. Now, obviously, I don't know this is true, but here's my take on what I think might have happened, and that is they could have easily told themselves, "Well, look, we do this," and they may not have believed in the supernatural at all, or they may have believed in it but knew they were playing a game here, setting all this up and acting all these silly things out, but they could say to themselves, well, the people that we do this with, they're miserable before, and afterwards they seem to be at least a little bit better. So we may not really be healing them or helping them or solving their problem, but if what we do makes them feel better, isn't that a good thing? So we're really doing a good thing here. We're really doing a service to people. And I don't know this either, but I'll bet you that so many of the fake healers that are all over the internet and cable TV and everywhere today, I'm not going to name any names, you know who they are. I think they may rationalize some of their behavior too. It's very hard for human beings to just say, yes, I'm a bad person, I'm doing bad things, there's no redeeming qualities here. We want to see ourselves in a positive light. And so if I say, well, yes, I know that, I'm not really healing these people, but maybe God heals some of them, I don't know, I do these things, and I know that at least for a little while they feel better, so isn't that worth it? Sure, they give us this money, but isn't that worth, how much is feeling good worth to you, and blah, blah, blah. So the point is here, I'm sure these exorcists had a rationale which made them feel better, even if it made no sense or wouldn't hold up under any kind of scrutiny, because that's how human beings work. You and I rationalize our sin the exact same way. And we all know it, even though none of us really want to admit it. So that's something to think about when you read these stories in the Bible. Remember that a lot of these people in their own minds have a reason to do what they do, because everybody has a reason to do something. And a lot of these people have the arrogance to disobey God, do evil, but somehow in their own minds make themselves the hero of the story. Just like you and I do. Because people are people are people, and human nature is still the same today as it was thousands of years ago. Our cultures have changed, our nature has not. Till next time, thanks for watching. God bless you, and so long.